Welcome back to the Unfiltered Fix. I'm Megan Sharpe, Chief Operating Officer at Zen Regen, co-founder of Givome, licensed esthetician, and certified health coach. Today, we're taking on a topic that so many people struggle with, which is weight loss. And let's be real, it's not just about cutting carbs and counting steps. Sustainable, healthy weight loss is a serious journey with a lot of misconceptions along the way. But don't worry, to help us unpack all of this, I've brought in Dr. Ruby Deng again, our naturopathic doctor at Zen Regen and clinical study investigator at Integrative Research Institute. We're going to dive into the myths, key factors for success, and how to keep the weight off for good. Ruby has a very unique perspective on medical weight loss, combining science with a holistic approach that goes beyond calorie counting. So if you're looking for real, sustainable weight loss solutions, you're in the right place. Good morning, Dr. Ruby. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. How are you?
Good morning, Megan. I'm great. Thank you for that introduction. I'm so excited to talk about this today.
It's such a hot topic that, again, a lot of people struggle with. And I feel like there's so much more that can be done to help people along this journey. So I'm very excited to jump into this conversation with you.
Likewise. I mean, it's such a hot topic, like you mentioned too, and there's so many conceptions and misconceptions out there. So I think it's a great time that we debunk all of that.
Perfect. Let's jump right in. One of the biggest myths that I hear about weight loss is just that it's all about willpower. And if someone isn't losing weight, it's because they're not trying hard enough. And I know that that can be true for some, but I also strongly believe that weight loss is really influenced by so many factors like hormones, gut health, stress, and even genetics. I want to dive into some of these areas a little bit more, but what are your thoughts on this myth?
Absolutely. You know, I will say even myself, when this medication and when these medications, initially came out, I was a little skeptical. I was like, you know what? The power of diet and lifestyle changes can really make a tremendous impact. But there are so many individuals out there who are eating incredibly clean, tracking their macros, getting their 10K steps, lifting weights, sleeping well, and the weight won't budge. And so this medication and these medications over time have been able to show that they are safe and effective, for weight management. They help to reduce inflammation. They help a lot of individuals with hormone regulation again, and it helps with the, diabetes type 3, which is Alzheimer's and dementia. So there's a lot more benefits that are coming out from them that we even realized initially. So I think the biggest misconceptions with weight, first of all, is that a tailored solution for everybody. Everyone, if they just diet and exercise, they can drop the weight. But that's not necessarily true. And then number two, that, some of these medications out there are just a quick fix. Within taking it for a month or two, you can drop that 20, 40 pounds and get your perfect body. And that's also not true because that's not healthy. So I'd say the biggest misconceptions out there in additionally is that the weight will also stay off too. And so what's really important is with individuals is just educating them about proper diet, proper exercise routines, honing in on these lifestyle changes to help with keeping the weight off too.
Yeah. And I think that's something that, at Zen Regen, we really talk a lot about because that was also a misconception that I played into was the medication piece. I thought that a lot of people just used it as a crutch or a shortcut, but it's such a helpful tool for people that are really struggling with other areas of weight loss. At Zen, being able to talk through these different lifestyle factors with individuals and really helping them on their journey while incorporating the medications has proven to be so successful. So I'm definitely a believer now.
Something that comes in mind is a patient who really relied on alcohol before the medications, before, just helping her unwind and de-stress. And if anything, these medications have helped her reduce her dependency on alcohol. And as we know, that helps with supporting liver function, detoxification, reducing inflammation, improving sleep quality. So it's having all these downstream effects too, which are incredible.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about that, being able to help with the addictive piece. So I definitely think there is a huge role and place for these medications that we'll talk about a little bit further in. Another big misconception that I hear are that all calories are equal. Well, spoiler alert, they're not. The quality of those calories really depend on the whole foods versus processed junk foods. And I remember that I had somebody tell me one time that the salads that I enjoy so much was no better than a Big Mac from McDonald's. And I don't have a great poker face, so I just basically looked at her and laughed. But I know that she's not the only person that I've heard that from. And a lot of people do believe that all calories are equal. Can you talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So, what I find fascinating is how we live in a culture that counts calories rather than counting our macros. So, for instance, everybody has a goal that they kind of have in mind, whether it's 1500, 1700, 2200, and they think, okay, so maybe I'm having this Big Mac and that's, I don't know, 1,000, 1,200 calories. Great. I still have 1,000 calories left, and they can go on and have a brownie. They can go on and have some fries, and they can finally get to that 2,000 calories. But that's not true. That's not going to move the needle at the end of the day. What I really love to educate people on is that protein is thermogenic. So protein helps with burning fat too. So the more protein we eat, it's helping with muscle mass formation, but it's also burning fat. And then individuals have different ratios of their macro breakdown. So some individuals are more carb burners, some individuals are more fat burners too. As women, we do need a healthy amount of fat too. So when a lot of women go on really low fat diets as well, and they just eat a ton of carbs, they lose their period, they feel terrible. And so it's finding the right ratios in terms of that caloric goal that really help to give the optimal results.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just talking to somebody recently and he was trying to bulk up, and I was asking him, like, what diet are you using or what protocols are you following? And he's like, oh, I just consume anything I possibly can. And most of the time it's just fast food. And I was thinking to myself, what that's doing to the inside, right? I mean, it's definitely triggering inflammation, and he looked amazing. So it appeared that it was working well for him, but I know that that's not always the case, or it's not at all. So thank you so much for sharing that very important piece with us.
Of course. Yeah. I'm curious to look at his lipid panel because while he may look great on the outside, there's also so many of those skinny fat people who have, some of that visceral fat, their LDL's through the roof. Who knows what their triglycerides are like? Maybe he has some insulin resistance. So the way people appear isn't the true definition of health too.
It's so true. One thing that I want to talk about today is how a natural approach or a naturopathic approach to weight loss differs from other methods. One thing that I really love about your approach is how it's so different from traditional eat less, move more advice. And then, of course, the now so prevalent telemedicine platforms that prescribe these medications and then just leave people on their own to navigate the journey. I truly feel like we change lives at Zen Regen with our program because it focuses on the root causes of weight gain, right? Or helping people lose weight in a healthy aspect. I was just talking to a friend the other day about how certain words resonate differently with different people. For example, the word holistic to me makes me think of treating a whole person, the underlying conditions that exacerbate the symptoms, things like inflammation, your gut health. But for her, the word holistic makes her think of hippie or granola. And so I would really love for you to share with our listeners what sets you and your approach apart and what a holistic weight loss program means. What does that look like?
Megan, this is such a good conversation point because I'm just going to backtrack a little bit. When I was in medical school too, and I mentioned the term that I was a naturopathic doctor, this was, back, 10 years ago when people would be like, natural who, natural what? What do you do? Do you just sprinkle fairy dust on people or give them all these things that, don't have any scientific evidence around it? So what I will say is there's been a huge change in the trajectory of how people view holistic medicine, but there is still a lot of, same things, misconceptions out there. So holistic, from my perspective and many of our perspective, is getting to the root cause. So like you mentioned, we focus on the whole body. We look at mental, emotional health, physical health, psychological health too. We really spend time with our patients and we really get to know them from the inside out. So with more of a holistic weight management program, I do this questionnaire initially with my patients about what are your obstacles when it comes to your health, when it comes to eating, when it comes to diet, what have you tried? What does your sleep look like? What are you eating? What do your relationships look like? What is your relationship like to alcohol? So, and food too, do you use food as a crutch in terms of, in times of high stress or emotional situations? So I'd really like to know where my patient is at, what they've tried, what's worked before, what hasn't worked before too. Really have this conversation with them and get to know them before I even think think about prescribing any type of medication or supplement plan to them too. And then what also I feel like sets us apart too is we really focus on lab work. Before even conversation begins about next steps, we go through, comprehensive lab work, looking at their complete blood count, their metabolic panel, looking at their liver and kidney function to make sure they're even good candidates, looking at their hemoglobin A1C, their fasting blood sugar, their fasting insulin too, to see is this a medication that's indicative for them, their lipid panel, like I mentioned as well as their thyroid function. And so a lot of times, so many individuals are just being prescribed these medications without even talking to a provider who's well-versed in these medications, without, understanding their obstacles and their barriers, and without running any lab work to see if they're even a good candidate. And then after that, we then have a full consultation session where we sit down, we talk about diet, we talk about what foods do they like, what are they currently eating, what, does exercise and routine look like for their bodies too, and we come up with a full plan. What that looks like is I give every person a, calorie goal. I give them a macro goal. I give them ways to track it. I check in with them on them too. And then I ask them if it's feasible, because a lot of people are so excited, to get started. And some people are like, I can't do diet and exercise and make all these changes all at once. And so okay, let's take a pause back. Let's just focus on one at a time. And the biggest thing is just to start with protein. And so many people who are on these medications aren't given nutritional guidance. And so they're still eating the fast food. They're still eating the cheesecakes for desserts, yet they're losing weight. But the problem with that is when they stop these medications, all of the weight is going to come back on. So like you mentioned at Zen Regen, we're really trying to change people's lives by instilling these really healthy habits so that they stick and they last for life too.
Yeah, I feel like, going back to the labs, I think that's such an important piece to the puzzle. And even if they are ordering labs, I feel like when people get the labs, the majority of people can't look at their results and actually figure out what it means, right? And so I think being able to meet with them and walk them through that process and what each of those different levels and markers mean to their weight loss journey is so crucial. And I also think that, if they're just being left to their own devices with this medication, it could potentially be creating like a medical anorexia, because part of that is to curb the cravings and make them want to eat less. But if all they're doing is putting junk into their body when they feel like they're missing out on all of these important nutrients to be able to do this in a healthy manner. So I think those are all really good points. Before we jump into some of those underlying things that could really be keeping people from achieving their healthy weight, I want to talk about some of the medications and supplements that are out there. Of course, there's the heavy hitters like the GLP-1s, such as Semaglutide and Tirzepatide. And these might be a really great option for somebody with insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes. But there are also a lot of really great supplements that can help aid in healthy weight. And so some that come to my mind are MIC, NAD, berberine. I know that a lot of these can help you regulate your blood sugar and speed up your metabolism. What's your take on the role that these supplements and medications can play in weight management? And how do you guide your patients to really know what might be the best option for them?
So these are also really incredible supplements that are out there that aren't getting as much attention just because, there's so many of the GLP-1 agonists that are kind of currently taking the spotlight. But with kind of deciding what plan and path to go on with patients, it's really about their goals. It's really about their comfort level. And it's really about even financial too. That plays a role. We talk about that involvement as well. So for instance, let's say we have an individual who doesn't have as much weight to lose, let's say maybe 10 to 15 pounds. We run lab work. Everything is beautiful, beautiful lipid panel, great, well-controlled hemoglobin A1C, not necessarily insulin resistant. That can be a case where we can go and do the supplemental route. So some of my favorite herbs for also helping with blood sugar management is berberine, like you mentioned. So berberine, chromium, alpha-lipoic acid, gymnema, they all work together synergistically to help with blood sugar regulation, help to support insulin resistance too. And then there's actually a probiotic called Akkermansia, which is incredibly protective for the gut microbiome. And so what it does, this specific strain is increased in times of fasting. So let's say overnight fast, fasting in between meals. And so a lot of individuals who tend to graze all day actually don't produce as much of this bacterial strain. And so a lot of my healthy individuals who are exercising, same thing, the weight's not kind of budging, I ask them, do you fast between meals? And they're like, no, I'm kind of eating every 2 hours to kind of meet my macro goals. And I'm like, you know what? Let's, try to add a little bit more fast to try to also increase this bacterial strain too. And then we can also supplement it, and we can check through gut microbiome testing to see if they're producing adequate amount of this certain strain of bacteria. So that's where sometimes supplemental routes can go. And also we can start supplements when a patient wants to start to discontinue any GLP-1 medications too. So let's say they've gotten to their successful goals, they're feeling great, they've maintained their muscle mass, but they also still want to have a plan in place when they kind of come off of it so they don't just cut it cold turkey. So we can start adding these supplements in as being a supplemental to their regime as they start to taper down on the medication too.
Yeah, I love that. And something that I find really fascinating is how some people are like really skeptical about taking supplements. And something that I hear a lot is, well, there's lack of studies, right, that exist. But they're also, these same people are really quick to jump to pharmaceuticals and they're taking their physician's word for it, or these pharmaceutical companies. And they're like, well, there's studies out there. But I don't think that they're really taking into consideration some of the long-term potential side effects. And so the reality is that there are very few studies at all, if any, when combining multiple variables. And that's truly what you're doing, right? So I know that you can talk about this too, but there's no FDA regulation on supplements. And so there are very few, if any, studies combining what the effects would be if you were to combine all of the supplements that you mentioned and what that's going to be. It's kind of subjective to some degree, but they're relatively safe. Can you talk a little bit about what your thoughts are on that?
Absolutely. So there are actually quite a few studies on many supplements. And so when it comes to me as a practitioner and a doctor, everything that I recommend has to have evidence-based, information to it and studies and randomized controlled trials. And so while a lot of supplements aren't FDA approved, they do go through studies. And I give a lot more preference for those supplements who have put their products through trial. And so I'm not just going to random willy-nilly, use my intuition to try to guide someone on a path. There is clinical research around it.
Is that where that fairy dust comes in? That witchcraft that people were talking about?
Exactly. No witchcraft here. And so that being said, there's a lot of different companies out there who follow the rigor of following the FDA guidelines, meaning they're third-party tested, they're produced in a CGMP facility, tested for heavy metals, they've put their studies through, randomized controlled trials too. When I see the evidence there, that's when I'm more inclined to recommend those supplementation there. That being said, there is evidence, but not all supplements are created equal. And one of the worst places I say to go to get your supplements from is from Amazon, because it's not regulated. You don't know the expiration date. You don't know what's in there. You don't know if it's the true supplement or not too. So, getting it from a high quality source is also very, very important. And what I find fascinating about medications is you read a medication label and there's a whole host of side effects. A lot of people are scared to try supplements because they're like, oh, what if I get a bellyache, or what if I get some constipation or something? The thing about it is they generally have a lower side effect profile and they're less damaging too. But, there are some risks that come with it. But that being said, working with a provider who knows supplements well and who knows the side effects well to help manage them is incredibly important.
I totally agree. I couldn't agree more, actually. So interesting to me when you look at these medications, a lot of them, like you said, have a lot of side effects. But then it's like, okay, well, if you're experiencing this side effect, then we're going to put you on a different medication. And if that medication has another side effect, we're going to put you on another medication. And it's just this crazy cycle that people go through, to whereas if you have a naturopathic doctor or somebody that's really well versed that can walk you through this process and help you eliminate things, you may even be able to get off of some of your medication. Obviously, you want to talk to your provider about that to make sure you're doing it safely. But I've seen great success with people getting off a lot of their medications, blood pressure medications, all kinds of cholesterol medications. Those are just some of the things that come to my mind.
Yes, there's so many benefits. I've even worked with individuals who've been on, different psychiatric medications too. And there's a lot of different supplements that they can do to help to support their neurotransmitters and their brain health. So it doesn't always just stop at cardiovascular health or metabolic health. It can really go on to hormonal health. It can go on to gut health and so on.
Yeah, it's true. One of the things while people are going on this weight loss journey is the risk of losing too much weight too fast. And we had talked about it for a second. One of the things, or some of the things that I see when this happens, is it impacts individuals' hair health, their skin health, their bone health, muscle mass. What's some advice that you can give to our listeners to help them improve their overall health while using medications like GLP-1s?
So I'll go through the most common side effects. And so the biggest side effects about losing weight too quickly is losing muscle mass. What I find really wild about with a lot of individuals going and following the conventional dosing of the medication, which in my opinion is way too high, way too quickly, is they don't eat for every other, like maybe they're eating once every other day or they're eating one meal a day. They feel faint, they feel weak, they're, brain fog, fatigue, their hair's falling out, they're losing muscle, but they're losing weight, but they're losing so many other things too. So one thing that I always recommend is I give people a protein goal based on each individual person. And so if you can focus on one nutrient when you're eating, is just focus on getting that goal. If we don't hit the carb goal, that doesn't matter as much to me. If we don't hit your fat goal, that doesn't matter as much to me. Just focus on protein, because protein will help with sustaining muscle mass and it'll help with supporting your skin and your hair. Another thing that people get is that Ozempic face where they lose, all of the beautiful collagen in their face and they just look a little gaunt. I want to prevent that from happening too, and that happens when they lose weight too quickly. That being said, like I mentioned, people can supplement with oral collagen to help with supporting their collagen stores. They can also, constipation is a common side effect, so take some magnesium, either oxide or citrate, to help with relieving some of that, because the medication promotes a slower gastric emptying. And so for those who tend to have more sensitive digestive systems, tend to either lean towards too loose of bowels or having, just more of the constipation. Fatigue tends to come up. So, really focusing on nutrient-dense meals too. So that being said, making sure you're getting in your fruits throughout the day, making sure you're maybe just getting a protein shake with a handful of berries and greens can really help with supporting healthy energy too. And then this is usually when patients are on higher dosages, and I generally haven't seen it because I don't like to put my patients on higher dosages too quickly. Nausea and vomiting tend to occur. And so something that can help with mitigating that is ginger tea, ginger chews, as well as peppermint tea.
The side effects like the nausea, or I hear this too, is that I feel like more people on semaglutide experience that side effect than individuals on Tirzepatide. And I know that that's why at Zen Regen, we had focused more on providing the Tirzepatide. We can do both, but I think there are less side effects like those when people are on Tirzepatide.
Absolutely. And so that's what the research has shown. And generally with semaglutide, some patients tend to hit a plateau. And there's about a 30 to 35% increase in terms of a better weight management and a less side effect profile with the Tirzepatide. So they believe because it acts on two different receptors, so the GLP-1 as well as the GIP. And for individuals listening, so GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide, and GIP, glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide. So basically what these mean and what the Tirzepatide does is it helps with stimulating insulin secretion in response to food intake, and it reduces gastric emptying. So what that means is you feel full faster and you feel full longer too. With the information about people feeling full longer too, they don't get those hunger pangs as much, they don't get the drop in blood sugar as much, and I think that's what's really preventing people from experiencing as many of those side effects.
That's great information. One thing too, if they are feeling hungry faster, something to consider is more fiber in their diet too. But I want to talk about the protein goal that you set for individuals. And I know that it varies from person to person depending on what their output is as well. But a high protein diet, are you recommending like 1 to 1.5 grams of protein per pound?
Yep. So we go through, I sit down with each of my patients and we go through, we calculate their current weight, we calculate, their resting metabolic rate. And based off of the resting metabolic rate and their activity level, we'll come up with a caloric plan. But a good rule of thumb is, let's say someone is completely sedentary, they don't go for walks, they don't lift weights. The rule of thumb is starting with half of their body weight in grams of protein a day, just because of that thermogenic effect. We want them to start burning their fat with the protein. Let's say they're more active, we're going to increase that depending on their activity level. Are they a CrossFitter? Are they running? Are they a Pilates individual? Based off of their activity level, we'll increase to get to that 1 to 1.5 grams per kilogram type of ratio too.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Another reason that I think doing a weight loss program like this at Zen Regen is because we do focus on the whole person, right? And so when you were talking about Ozempic face, that is a real thing, but it's not just in their face. They start to sag elsewhere. And part of that, again, is losing that muscle mass. But at Zen, we do have things that can help them through those, like Sculptra, for example. It's an injectable that helps stimulate collagen production. So it really addresses the sagging skin. It can be used for the face and the body. And I know that when we always recommend that individuals start it between their 1 and 3 months, or they do it at 1 month into their weight loss journey and again at 3 months, so that we can really make sure that they're not getting that sagging skin. And then also muscle stem devices like M-Sculpt. That is hugely beneficial when somebody's going through their weight loss journey, so that they're maintaining a healthy muscle mass. And when we use our Shape scale, which is a 3D scale that we put our patients on to really monitor what their muscle mass is, where their water weight is, we give them goals and things that they can watch for throughout their journey, which I think is really beneficial for individuals.
I am so passionate about our Shape scale because patients get a true, representation of their body, of their muscle mass, of their visceral fat, and we can monitor to make sure that they're not losing too much muscle at once. A big part of our body program at Zen Regen is that we offer this free 3D body scan monthly for our patients. And so it's a great way for patients to track their progress. It's a great way for me to make sure they're on the correct dosage and they're meeting their goals too. But I do love our M-Sculpt as well. And I love all of our, collagen boosting services that we have too.
Yes. Dr. Ruby, we have shared a ton of great information so far, but we are still missing a really important piece. And I really want to talk now about the importance of addressing things like hormone imbalances, insulin resistance. I feel like if people don't address these issues, they're really going to struggle with sustainable results, because nobody wants to work their butt off and just gain the weight right back. Can you tell our listeners how important it is to really balance those hormones and address the insulin resistance effect for a healthy weight?
Absolutely. So the most common hormonal imbalances that I see with individuals struggling to lose weight, so mainly in the reproductive age women, it's PCOS, as well as having more estrogen dominance. And then in perimenopause, menopausal women, it's that rapid, fluctuating estrogen, as well as that rapid decline in estrogen and, decline in testosterone too. So most individuals, they just kind of deal with the symptoms. And I'm like, you don't have to deal with the symptoms. There are ways around it too. The hot flashes, the night sweats, the fatigue, the weight gain specifically around the abdomen too. Those are, your classic perimenopause symptoms. And so what's happening is that decline in the estrogen is triggering a lot of the symptoms too. Like I mentioned, that decline in the testosterone is reducing the muscle mass formation. Same thing in PCOS, there's the insulin resistance type. And so what that means is, in response to food, we're not producing adequate amount of insulin to help with managing blood sugar regulation. Same thing, that can lead to more just general weight and inflammation around the body. So what we can do is we can get to the root cause of a lot of these different hormonal concerns. My personal favorite way to test is through something called Dutch testing. So it's a urine hormone test that looks at the bioavailability of our hormones, meaning how do the hormones affect our tissues directly? And then that way we know how to manipulate it, whether it's through supplements, whether it's through actual HRT prescriptions, because some, women prefer that route. Even men too, men can actually produce estrogen and have higher amounts of estrogen and retain a lot of adiposity and retain inflammation and weight too. So there's ways to detoxify estrogen in males, as well as boost our testosterone in healthy levels. And then an area that I'm really passionate about too is just the gut microbiome and gut health, because, so many individuals are inflamed, whether it's through foods that they're eating, whether it's through sensitivities, whether it's through having an imbalanced gut microbiome. So same thing, we can test, we can understand what's the driving factor of inflammation. Because if, you can keep eating the same foods every day and just try to, you just feel terrible. You feel bloated, you feel sluggish, you just feel puffy. But, the reason we can be producing inflammation is because of the certain bacteria. Some of the most common food sensitivities that I see are dairy, sometimes eggs, sometimes oats. Everyone's having overnight oats or, having their omelet in the morning. And once we can identify what's triggering each individual, we have a much better success of reducing the inflammation, and then the weight comes right off and it stays off too.
And I think that's a whole episode that we could do separately, honestly, because there is so much that goes into that. I know for me, I struggled a lot. I was very estrogen dominant, and estrogen is important, right? Essential brain function, skin, all the things, healthy hair, and it's wonderful, but it also affects people differently. And bioidentical hormone replacement therapy has been such a game changer for me. And a lot of times when I'm talking to my friends and they're asking me what I'm on, and I even mention, you should never be prescribed estrogen without progesterone. And we'll get into that in another episode. But I let them know that I am also on testosterone. And they're like, but you're female. And I think that many women don't realize that testosterone is such an important hormone for us women also, not just men. And so I love that you're taking all of that into consideration.
We need to, our hormones don't act alone. And if we take an individualized approach, we can better understand and manage the symptoms and optimize health. And that's what we're here to do, is optimize health and produce, sustainable results and outcomes.
Yeah. And life is really about finding balance in all areas, including hormones, right?
Absolutely.
I also believe that stress and sleep are two things that people underestimate hugely when it comes to weight loss. What's your take?
Oh, they are so important. It is part of every one of my conversations with my patients. So if someone is not sleeping at least 7 to 8 hours a night, they're not repairing, they're not detoxifying, they're not allowing the body to go into that rest and digest phase. And then if they're stressed out, the body's in that chronic fight or flight. It produces insulin resistance, it produces inflammation. You're not going to see a pound budge if you're in this chronic stress state. So focusing on stress management and sleep hygiene is essential for every patient. And it's something that's starting to get a little bit more awareness, but people are still, pretty resistant to making changes. We're kind of in this hustle, go, go, go culture, and we're not focusing on, really taking the time to rest. And we're not supposed to be productive all the time. We're not supposed to be working, all hours of the night. We need time to allow the body to do its job. I think that no treatment plan is successful without implementing, good quality sleep and stress management.
I totally agree. Will you share some tips on how people can improve their sleep hygiene and manage stress better?
I'd say at least an hour before bed, I make a rule to put, phones completely on do not disturb. You can actually put a function where you can put a red light onto your phone, and that will prevent the blue light. And then if you're watching TV, make sure to always use blue light lenses, especially when the sun is no longer out. And generally, I just try to say, try to avoid anything stimulating, whether it's your computer, whether it's your TV, whether it's your phone, within an hour before bed too. Try to read, maybe do a little bit of stretching, maybe take a warm bath before bed. Make that your you time. And then when it comes to stress management, I like to ask every individual, what is your favorite way to unwind? Some individuals going for a walk. Some people love, painting. Some people love dancing. Some people love, maybe it's just listening to a podcast. And so I say, okay, when was the last time that you actually did that? Most of them are like, I don't know, months. Part of their treatment plan is doing the homework of adding it into their routine every single day. I want, them to find joy. I want them to find self-care in some way every single day. So I said, just like a meeting schedule, and your self-care time has just had really tremendous benefits. I have so many patients who come back to me and they're like, thank you. Thank you for prescribing that for me, because I wouldn't have done that otherwise. The smallest little lifestyle changes can have the biggest impacts.
Yeah. I was sharing with you the other day that I've been really struggling with headaches the last few weeks. And so at night, I always check my email. It's a blessing and a curse to have these little devices right at our fingertips, right? But I've been more aware and conscientious and really trying to put my device down. And I have a device that I put over it's like an eye mask that I can wear. And it's about 15 minutes. You can turn it off whenever you want, but it massages, it has heat, it plays spa music. And it really has helped me unwind before I go to bed. And I've been using it every single night. So I'll be sure to share more about it in the show notes. But it's a device that I never knew I needed, honestly.
That sounds amazing. Where do I get one?
I'll share it with you, I promise. And then something else that I find or that is just very unique about Zen is that we have a service called Night Lace. It's a gentle laser treatment that really helps improve sleep quality. And it works by reducing snoring. It can help with sleep apnea and it's addressing some symptoms. What it does is it actually gently tightens the soft tissues in the throat by stimulating collagen, which helps keep the airway more open for better breathing during sleep. And I think this is a service that many people have no idea about and might want to try it out. It doesn't work just once. You have to do multiple treatments, but it is absolutely amazing. And it might not only improve your sleep, but it might improve your relationship too, because what partner wants to try and sleep with somebody that's snoring right next to him, right? So your partner will thank you if you look into this service.
How do I sign my partner up? Can I?
Mine too. Well, Dr. Ruby, we have shared so much amazing information. Before we leave, I really would love for you to help our listeners and give them some practical guidance on how to avoid the yo-yo effect of losing and regaining weight.
So I would say it's something that we haven't quite touched upon in the episode so far, but when it comes to, especially if individuals and patients are on this medication, I definitely recommend considering microdosing the medication. The reason I think that's so successful and so important is because you want an individual to be on the lowest dose where they're still having an appetite, because the moment we reduce our hunger signaling hormone ghrelin, over time, it will become a little bit more resistant. So when we actually discontinue the medication, it can come back with such an intensity, people tend to regain all of their weight back. So to avoid the yo-yo effect, I say, consider microdosing and talking to your practitioner about that, which means going at a more slower and sustainable method where you're still having an appetite, but essentially reducing probably the severity of those hunger cues too. And then just really focusing on, like I mentioned, multiple aspects. So making sure you're still having an adequate diet, your strength training, you're lifting weights. So lift weights, do resistance training, go for walks, and then consider just mindful eating. So, really focusing on understanding what's on your plate too, how hungry are you? Sometimes we still look at food with our eyes. And then just trying to eat with protein first. So when it comes to an order of eating, I always say focus on protein first, then have your fats, then have your carbs and your starches. And when you look at your plate that way, once you get full, at least you've consumed your proteins and your adequate fats too.
Yeah, which are the building blocks of energy.
Absolutely. And consider, a health coach to work with you, a nutritionist if you want additional support, a personal trainer or some fitness specialist too. Maybe consider joining some group classes in a gym to hold the accountability, because really avoiding the yo-yo, it's when people discontinue the medication, it comes right back. So it's about creating these healthy habits earlier on to have the sustainable results too over time.
Yeah. And something that's an absolute must for me is flexibility and balance. I see a lot where people are like, nope, can't eat it. They're so dedicated and they don't allow themselves any kind of wiggle room. And I am somebody who, if you tell me no, I want it even more. I'm like determined for whatever reason. It's this psychological thing. And so if I give myself a little grace and allow myself some flexibility in my diet or my nutrition, I find it to be, more beneficial and just something that I can actually maintain.
Absolutely.
And microdosing is something that I've considered as well. As you know, I have not used GLP-1s. I did my own weight loss journey and it was hugely successful for me, but it's something that I have thought about incorporating just more for like longevity medicine for all of the benefits that you had mentioned earlier. Is this something that you would recommend for somebody that is really trying to get over that hump? Or do you feel like you would guide them in, a healthy dosage for them to get over that hump and then transition them to a microdose?
So it really depends on each individual. For instance, if someone, like I mentioned, someone like you who comes in and they're like, I just want to optimize my health. First and foremost, we'll look at, to make sure you're a good candidate. The fact that you're not hypoglycemic too is also going to be something to keep in mind. But, let's say the starting dose of Tirzepatide, so currently is 20 units. And let's say you wanted to microdose it. So we can start at a quarter of that. We could start at 5 units just to see, is it helping with reducing potential that late night cravings or those snackings, or just kind of helping with feeling full a little bit quicker too. So there's some individuals who are healthy. Like I mentioned, I have a lot of athletes that I work with. I have a lot lot of individuals that you look at them, they fit the cleanest bill of health, but they're still struggling with that weight management piece. And so that's where obviously, we focus on hormones, we focus on gut health, we fix all of it, and they're still struggling. So that's a good chance in a good time where we can, consider microdosing. And then with a lot of my patients coming in, let's say they don't have a lot of weight to lose. They just have, maybe that 20 pounds postpartum that never came off weight, or they're in that perimenopause, 15 pounds that just kind of came on overnight. And those are good candidates as well for considering microdosing. So, I just kind of work with each individual in their journey to figure out the best step for them. And then we can also microdose them off the medication, as well as keep them on a maintenance dose, because there's more information about this. Is actually a safe medication to be used long term. It's really amazing with this medication how far it's come, because it's considered a peptide, and it's actually peptides that the body produces. And so we're just kind of giving the body a little gentle nudge to healthfully, produce more of them.
Absolutely. That's such great food for thought. Well, before we close, do you have anything else that you would like to add?
I would say that coming from someone who was skeptical, who looked thoroughly into the research, who's worked with plenty of individuals about it, it's something that I am more open to recommending individuals. But the biggest thing I recommend for listeners out there is work with a provider who actually wants you to have sustainable results moving forward, who's having a holistic approach working with you. If they're just prescribing the medication without talking to you, without looking at your labs, consider somewhere else, because these are changes that you want to build upon. So it's kind of the biggest thing is that I want individuals to take away is there are some certain circumstances where this can be indicated, and it can be used at different dosages than what's conventionally provided out there. And it's been shown to have some really incredible results.
Yes, that's so important.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Dr. Ruby, where could somebody find you if they're looking to learn more from you?
I have my personal website, so it's www.drrubenadeng.com. Otherwise, they can find me on Instagram, which is Heal with Dr. Deng. If anyone wants to be a patient or learn more, I am at Zen Regen. So Megan, I'm sure you'll include it into the show notes of where to find me if they want more information.
I will. All right, guys. Well, remember that sustainable weight loss is more than just the number on the scale. It's really about achieving true health. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope you found it valuable. And if you're ready to take the next step toward your health goals, reach out for a consultation. We'd love to help you create a plan that works perfectly for you. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow the Unfiltered Fix on Apple and Spotify for more unfiltered conversations about health, wellness, and confidence. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.